This morning or today, I'm going to bring you through the business model canvas. This is the should I say, the backbone of most of our lectures, and underpinning a lot of the activities that will form your assessments and so on. Okay, so I just need to jump to another page, do my usual trickery. So now, here we are, and I just need to get my PowerPoints up and running. And we will enlarge it. PowerPoint enlarge. And there we have it. Now, to make my life a little bit easier, I'm going to stand up and present this because it helps my back. Okay, folks, as I said, the business model canvas, and I'll give you a bit of the history on it yesterday, and you'll find on your Moodle page there are a number of presentations, and this one is just called BMC, Dr. Mark Cashin 2016, or it might be just Dr. Mark Cashin, I can't remember, but that's the one I'm using for today's lecture, and it synopsizes down a lot of the other material as well. But you have what's known also as the Startup Owner's Manual. Essentially, it's a presentation, and there's a PDF version of the book up there as well for your benefit. Now, you don't need to read through the whole lot of it, because what we present on these sessions will be more than adequate. You can just browse the rest of the stuff at your own leisure, so to speak. So, get focused onto the PowerPoint. That's it. Now we can go. So, what's the business? I mentioned yesterday that we have these, what do you call it? This canvas. And it is literally it normally comes in a big A1 size sheet where you have these 9 boxes in it, and in here in the center one, this part here, that's generally speaking the most valuable or the most important part of the. I'm just turning off my phone. Sorry. That's the most the starting point. That's the very first block that needs to be looked at. It's what's known as the value proposition, and generally speaking, that's simply the idea that you're going to come up with, the concept. And in other words, what do you think a customer would like? What pain is your customer actually experiencing that you're going to try and cure for them? What's their need, and so on. That's the very first starting point. And of course, that first box plus this one over here, who are your customers? The interaction between these two boxes are absolutely critical. This one here and this one here. Okay. And I can use it remotely. I forgot I can use my cursor remotely as well. Anyway. So the value proposition. Now, again, as I said to you, this is not purely for entrepreneurs. That it's important to grasp that idea. It can be any size of an organization, and it can be for any idea that might be coming in. You might have, for example, you might be out and talking to some of your colleagues in your network, and they might happen to mention some new piece of software that's helping in their helping in their financial department. And you might go back to your company and say, oh, this is a great idea, we don't use this software, we should look at this. And you might say, well, okay, would you go off and have a look and see how it might benefit? So that's where you put the business case together. That simple idea will get you started. And you might go off and then say, talk to the people in finance and say, would this benefit them? And so essentially they're your customers. So that can happen inside an organization. It could be a huge manufacturing company, and you might actually be manufacturing, let's just say you're manufacturing cars, and the company, it might have an idea or a suggestion that they might want to manufacture electric bikes. They're very popular or become popular. Let's make electric bikes. So that's an idea. It's a concept, and the company might look at it, well, is this feasible? So you might be heading up that project, and that'll be the first thing to do, say, is there a market for this? Who are our customers? What would be the benefits? Who are our competition? So just anyway, as I was explaining, so we have you could be you might be tasked as a project manager to introduce e-bikes, and therefore you'll have to go and find out your customer base and who's really interested in this and the size of the market. But also you want to find out, there are other e-bikes out there. What could I offer? What could our company offer? So as I said, it works in multiple types of situations, whether it's a small organization, a large organization, or a startup. So from there, this is just another way of showing how it's represented. You have the business idea down here in this nicely packaged box, which has been sold to your customer. You find out who the segments are. And then, of course, in that you can see why these two boxes are left out, and you have these, where are these arrows here and here, which are the other two boxes related to the customer relationship and your channels, how you're actually going to get your product to your customers on the bottom one, and then the top one, the relationship that you develop. So that quadrant in itself, that's very, very important. That they're the starting blocks of your project or your business idea or your startup as such. So if we move along, what is the business model canvas? Well, it's simply, I'll go sit down for this, so as I can see precisely what's written up here. As I say, companies, they create value for themselves while delivering products to customers. That's why you're in existence. That's why companies have what are known as mission statements. Your reason for being, French expression, raison d'etre, taught to me but many years ago by one of my mentors. He said, this is why you're in business. This is why you exist. An organization is a group of individuals that come together with complementing skills, abilities, and so on to deliver a product or a service to a customer. That's what an organization is, in its simplest terms. Bearing in mind also, an organization doesn't have to be making profit. It could be a non-profit organization, such as a charity. So again, groups of individuals. So you have to have a reason. We've all come together to deliver or develop a new product. And that's why we talk about the use of these canvases. It just helps us to do that. Now, in this particular presentation, you can see the numbering and the sequence. So that gives you a little bit more hint as to the level of importance. There's a little bit of a mistake, or we'll call it a mistake for simplicity, because it uses numbers. One is the starting point. Then two, who are your customers? So you have an idea, you think now where you got the idea might be through a meeting with yourselves. You might have just dreamt it up, or you might have been talking to some customers and they were making suggestions, and you say, I have an idea based on what they were saying to me. Let's do a new feature, or let's develop a new product to meet what they're talking about, these customers. And then it talks about number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, 9, and that's it. Don't fall into the trap that you do these in that sequence, 1 first, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't work like that. You will be doing number 1, and you'll be thinking of your costs at the same time, and you'll be thinking, well, how am I going to charge, or what am I going to charge to cover my costs? So there's a lot of parallel or asynchronous thinking and processes going on at this time. That's how our minds work. We don't think in strict sequence as such. There's multiple things going on. So if we look at it from a 3 dimension, you'll be looking at, that's what a business model canvas does. And they don't explain this very well in their material, but keep that in mind. You will be working your mind, you're thinking of, I have a great idea for an e-bike for customers, and immediately you're thinking, well, where am I going to get materials? What components do I make? How am I going to design it? and that'll be a key partner, for example, or a key resource. You might end looking at some design company or design engineers. So you're thinking of all these because straight away you might be a business student, but you're not an engineer. So you'll be thinking, well, how am I going to make this? It's a great idea. One of the best examples that's given in the book, actually, from a number of years ago, were the Harvard Business School students, who, again, were going through exactly what you guys are learning now, and how to use these concepts and so on. And they came up in their startup type organization, they came up with an idea for a robotic lawnmower. Okay. And they went off and they got the engineering department to build this thing and so on. And it was costing something on $20,000 to cover their costs and make a few dollars on this. And one of the guys said, hang on a second, this isn't practical. The problem with this is, who's going to spend $20,000 for a really advanced robotic lawnmower, where we can get people in to cut our grass for $10, $20 once a month? Doesn't make sense. It's not a business sense. But the point is that first point is that as business students, they got the engineers, so they complemented the skills they didn't have. They went and they got key partners to help develop and design the product. But always the case, because no one knows everything. You know, maybe some people like to think they do, but generally speaking, people don't know everything. So they'll need help and so on. You might be a business student, you might be really good at finance, and you're not so good at marketing. So you hire in somebody for marketing. And so all these things are happening in parallel. I'll finish out that story about the robot. What eventually happened was they performed what's known as a pivot. And that word pivot is very strongly linked inside in this business model canvas. Because a pivot means you change direction. You change your mind, you change direction. And what happened with these guys was that when they realized this didn't make a business sense to sell this for $20,000, the market would be extremely small and probably wouldn't be big enough to cover their costs and grow their company. So they came up with another idea using more or less the same technology as of this robotic lawnmower, but they raised it up to about that height, literally that height, about a meter off the ground or half a meter off the ground, and they sold it to carrot farmers. Okay, now in America, carrot farmers, they are, you know, there are square kilometers of carrot fields, and what they did was that this machine, to put optical recognition inside the machine, well, additional optical recognition, which could actually recognize weeds from actual carrot heads, the stalks of the carrot, and it was able to go in and pick up the weeds and throw them out to the side. That's all it did, and their business took off. But that was in other words, who they thought were their original customers, houses with gardens, general public use as such, who they thought that those people were their customer segments, turned out to be something totally different, and the product was used for a different purpose. That's what we talk about pivots, and that's what happens. And that's why, and you know, in a lecture last night, I was talking to students about strategy as well, and I said things change. Having strategies is a nice thing. It's a nice exercise, and you go through all the processes, your pestle, Porter's 5 forces, and all this sort of stuff, and you come up with, you know, a 3 or 5 year plan and so on. But it doesn't happen. Things change. This time last year, did we know of COVID? No. Well, we heard stuff in the news. So it's changed the way we live, the way we work, the way companies behave. So it could be anything. You know, you have this stupidity going on over in the States. As a consequence, will people have faith in the dollar? Will we change our currency? That could happen. Will Bitcoin become a new currency? Possibly. Most likely it will. And that will change the whole financial structure with banks and so on. So things are happening. So our original plan for 3 to 5 years could be changed in 3 weeks, 6 months, a year's time. Therefore, we need to be able to respond and change direction very, very quickly. So the point I'm making is that companies and individuals, ourselves, we need to be highly flexible and responsive. And I particularly like those two words in business because they really define how we need to exist, being flexible and responsive. And even employers are telling us, certainly telling me anyway, about students. They want students that are highly adaptable. They don't want pure specialists. We want students that are willing to learn, that can learn quickly, and that can hit the ground running, as we say, that they don't have to be told what to do every time, that they can think for themselves. So critical thinking, highly responsive, highly flexible. And I'm, I was going to say I'm standing proof of it, but I would be living proof of it. I started in accounting, for heaven's sake. Now look at me. Where did I go wrong? I know it's not all that bad. But started in accounting, then software engineering, hardware and business development, project management, and product design for a while, and then and now lecturing and consulting as well at the same time. Totally different. Now, all learning is valuable. Okay, and I know I'm going off what might sound like a bit of a tangent, but this is important because it underpins this whole concept of organizational learning. But we learn, and we might learn stuff now. You're learning stuff on this program. You might use it in the first job you go into. You might not use it for 5 years, 10 years, and you'll remember. I remember how that was done. It's done slightly differently today, but I understand what's going on. And even in my own career, when I was running very large projects in multinationals, my financial background was a big benefit because I was able to cost out projects far more accurately. And oftentimes my projects were succeeding more so than my colleagues. And the reason were they were very technical people. They didn't have the financial or business backgrounds that I would have come from. And as I said, you must realize, I said, the senior managers and directors of companies and so on, what they want is, how much is this going to cost me and when can I have it? And if they're interested in the technical detail, they'll ask. You might have technical people as directors, and you'll have finance, HR, marketing, and so on and so forth. They won't understand all of the detailed technicalities or technologies that you might be introducing, but they'll want to know how many people, how much is this going to cost us, and when do we get it? So they're just simple questions that have to be answered. And as I say, there's two languages in the world: money and love. I'm not going to teach you anything about love. Don't know anything about it. But money is certainly the other language. Everyone understands money. Okay, and as we say, for the love of money. Talk about confusing things. Anyway, so that's and that's the common denominator. So everyone can understand the universal translator if you're into Star Trek. But people understand this, and this is why we can communicate in this. How much it's going to cost us and so on. So that's why when we learn more and more about our customers, we can fine tune and change our direction. So the original idea can morph into something that's slightly different or dramatically different by the time you give it to the customer. Key point, you need to listen to customers. You need to listen to what precisely they're saying to you. Okay? And give them what they want. That's why you exist. That's your mission. Okay, and that's why these first phases or parts of the canvas are so critical and so important to listen. And it's often, as I said, one of the faults of entrepreneurs. They fall in love with their own ideas, and they become very blinkered, literally blinkered. They don't want to listen to anyone else. Anyone that criticizes them, they don't want to know. And that's why some of the more responsible and effective entrepreneurs, they surround themselves with people who challenge them, not yes men, people who challenge them. Because that's not a great idea, Mark. Have you thought about this? And I say, well, it was my idea. What's wrong with it? Have you thought about this possibility? And if I was mature enough to say, oh yeah, I didn't see it that way. That might make more sense. Okay, I'll try that. So that's the kind of thing. So you need to listen to your customers, listen to other people and what they're saying. And how they're saying it is equally as important, because it gives you valuable data. Valuable data becomes information which you can act on. So you get that information, you bring it back into your organization and say, hey, our customers are saying this, our customers are expecting that, they're not happy with this, and they'd like to have that, and so on. And you bring that back in. You're getting free data, free information on how to respond to your customers. Now, the more expensive version is you go out and carry out surveys and blah, 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 and all that sort of stuff. But generally speaking, if you're just listening to what people are saying, you can give them what they want. That's why flexibility and responsiveness are so critical. It's how quickly you act on them. So customers might give you a good idea or might make suggestions, and you might say, well, we'll take that on board. We'll think about that maybe in the next version of the product. The customer will go away and say, well, what's the point in talking to them? They don't do anything for us at all. You know, they're too slow, or they won't implement. They won't give us what we want. Will be the response from the customers. But if you give it to them and if you commit, and that's where you build up these relationships. And that's so critical. Now, you'll hear about things like customer relationship management. That's software. The act of interacting with your customers, that's where you start to build up relationships. If you simply take it in the love side of things, if you simply take it as male and female and they first meet, they get to know each other and then they get to understand each other's behaviors, nuances, personalities, and so on. The same thing applies in business. The more you speak, the more you interact with your customer, the more you understand and get more insight into them. And the more trust builds up between the company and the customers. And that's extremely critical, how you build those. And that requires personality types to be able to interact and build up that trust level. You can't go into the customer and you know, you oftentimes you get guys coming in making presentations on new technologies and so on, and they'd say something like, it's not rocket science, as if to say, are you stupid? Do you not understand? This is simple. And you know, a couple of times we've actually said to somebody, well, actually, this guy was a rocket scientist, and what you're describing is incorrect. Your technology won't do this and this. Sometimes people use that to try and appear as though they know everything, and because, oh geez, if they know everything, we should buy it because they know everything. Customers are a lot more clever than you think. They will actually, well, why does it work that way? Why does it do this? Why does it do that? And you've got to have the answers. Okay, so building up that relationship is absolutely critical. The other part, the channels, we'll come back to, but the value proposition, the customers, and how you interact, building that relationship, they're the most critical parts in the early stages, such that you get clarity, a clear understanding of the requirements and expectations of the customers. Okay, so if we move on, and that again, it's just some of these slides now from here on will be just supporting what I've already said. Key point, value proposition. What is it that you can offer to customers that's of benefit to them? That it either solves a problem, heals a pain, or is a need for the customer. There has to be a reason why you offer that. So value proposition, I said, it's not about your idea or your product. It's about satisfying whatever customers' needs are required, knowing who our customers are, and of course then is it about solving a need or a problem. And generally speaking, we can classify everything down into that level. You might be, let me see, what would be current example. Mobile phones, they're extremely powerful. Is there a need for all the features out there? Probably. Our manufacturers listening to what customers, they're looking at what customers are. They're using their mobile phones mostly now for social media and taking pictures and uploading to TikTok and so on and so forth. So they probably identify and they look at the way customers are using this. And, okay, let's create some nice new little add-ins to TikTok, for example, and put on these funny faces and so on, and add-ons inside it. Is it a need or problem? It's probably a need. They classify it as a need. Customers need this. Why? Because they probably observe customers painting up their faces and say, well, if we put something in there where we can simulate painting up a face onto TikTok, then our customers will buy it. It's that simple. You know, satisfying a customer need, and you see here, keeping the customer delighted. That's the name of the game, and that's why we're in business. Keeping them happy. You know, As I say, many years ago, I say, look after your customers and you will have a friend for life. Okay, I saw that on a billboard in just up in upstate in New York many years ago when I was over there at a wedding, would you believe it? And I remember looking out at this. I said, "This is typical American stuff, you know." But it actually made a lot of sense. If you look after your customers, you have a friend for life, and that's the relationship side. And then, of course, the customer segments. Who are they, and why would they buy? So you need to find out who your actual customers are. Um, if you're developing an e-bike, we'll stick with that example because it's quite current and it's a growth business. Who are your actual customers? Are they teenagers that like to cycle around the bikes? Are they older people like me or other older people because they need mobility? Or are they professional cyclists? Do we know? No. Well, we'd probably say, well, probably not professional cyclists. Why? Because we'll do our investigation and we'll see that the Union of Cyclists, International Cyclists, UCI, prohibit the use of any electronic or electric powered bikes in their competition. So professional cyclists, they won't want e-bikes as such. So generally speaking, people of an older age group that like to go out and get more exercise, and when they're cycling up hills, they like that additional level of support, or such as an e-bike, or they want to go out and do a bit more. So we're beginning to define our segment a little bit more. Why wouldn't you sell them to teenagers? Because they're young and healthy and fit, and they don't want e-bikes, and they can probably cycle faster than an e-bike anyway, possibly. Given that usually these things are around 30 kilometers an hour when you're using up all the power, but and they're heavy, and the cyclists might say, no, we don't need that. Teenagers. So you start to discount. So you probably find that the segment is probably 40 years of age upwards, and then people that are mobile, that are able to get up on a bike and so on and so forth. And interestingly, that seems to be the segment that people are pushing towards, generally speaking. So that's why, who are they? I'm trying to find out, and you go out and you ask and you talk and you do your research, and you try to get as much information as possible to find out who your customers are. And then why would they buy it? You might have existing people out there that are cycling bikes. Let's say, for example, I cycle bikes, and they might say to me, why would I buy an e-bike? Well, maybe I'm getting to an older age where I can't cycle as well as I used to, and for going up hills, to be able to stay with the group, I might want to buy one. That's why I would buy an e-bike, for example. Or because I might have had injuries and I can't cycle as much, or I'm getting old and my bones and knees are packing in and all that, and therefore I might like to have a little bit of an assistance cycling, but as long as I'm getting out and getting fresh air. So that's why. So you as a company have to identify all these different types of potential buyers. Are they male or female? What's the kind of split in that market? Probably find is a little bit more towards the male side of the thing. That's what we do for market side. Now, I know some of you probably have done marketing and marketing modules before, but that's essentially what we're looking at here. But the important thing here is that you, as the project manager or the business development manager or the entrepreneur, you guys have to go and find out all of this here. Now, in the early days, before people started using this business model canvas, we used to hire very heavy hitter marketing and sales people. In one company alone, we had a guy, and he for our MMS systems, as we call them, our short messaging and charging systems. This guy was on 150,000 euros to go out and meet customers and find customers and talk to them. If he got one sale in the year, he was doing well. It was that difficult. But the perception and the way businesses worked back then, you need to get someone that's really good and that knows the business and get him to open doors for us. You have to pay big bucks to get this guy in. But what was happening was these guys might be excellent salespeople and marketing people and so on. But when they started to go to the customer, if they had a second conversation with the customer, they were saying, "Hey, Mark, will you come to this meeting with me?" Or they might ask my boss, who was in this case he was technically he was brilliant. They might ask him to come along and say, just in case they have any technical questions. And that's what was happening all the time. And Osterwalder and a whole load of us were looking at this type of thing and saying, well, why are we paying this big money? I mean, they're taking our time out to go out and meet these customers, and you could be traveling across the globe just to meet customers. That's nature of business. And you could take a week out to go to South America to meet a customer, go through all the preparation, blah blah. Huge cost, just to meet and talk to a customer, and you mightn't get a sale. So my time is taken out. He was going over and all this, and roll on about 20 years. And I met a guy up here in Dublin. He runs a company called Thousand Seeds Innovation or something like that. But more importantly, he was an entrepreneur, and he similarly set up a short messaging company back in the late 90s, early 2000s. We're in the same space of products at the same time. And he likewise was hiring large heavy hitters, and again exactly said the same thing, going out and meeting customers. And he said if he had known about this canvas at the time, he could have saved himself thousands of euros by adapting this approach, and simply because he was actually selling the product, not the salesperson. He understood and technically understood the products, and that's why he was talking to customers. And that's why if he had managed his time a little bit more effectively, he could have done. He's Professor Raul Pereira is his name. He's a professor with INSEAD. But again, a technical and commercial background is not too dissimilar to myself, and ended up doing a little bit of lecturing. He doesn't do as much as I do. But anyway, the point is customer segments, finding out and going out there and meeting and talking to the customers. So who are they, and why would they buy from us? So look at our different segments. Your customers do not exist to buy; you exist for them. That's critical. And back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and into some of the 90s, companies made stuff and say, "Here, buy that. That's it." We're making them go up and buy it. Put it on the shelves. So companies existed to serve themselves, and people bought products. Not anymore. For the majority of products on the market today, it's known as a pull system. In other words, customers tell us what they want, so we manufacture. Back then, it was a push system. We built stuff and we pushed it out to customers. Now customers pull from us. That's why we have to be so responsive and so flexible to be able to give them what they want and listen very carefully to what they're saying. That's why, for example, in my, you don't see it here, but on one of my scrolling logos and things, you'll see look, listen, learn, and live. They're the should I say, that's the motto that I have around my own brand. It's precisely that when I'm talking about lectures: look, listen, learn, and live. Same for customers. You look, you listen to what they say, you learn from what they're saying, and you go and live it. You build it and develop it. See, there's always a reason for what might seem as a bit of a gimmick or a bit of a play. There's thought and effort going in there into all of these things. So why they exist, you exist for them. Your reason for being. And then we look at who are they? How old are they? Age, categories. Geographic breakdowns, gender, and so on. All of these different types of segmentation of your customer. And then, of course, we have the channels. How do we get our products to the customers? And that could be a whole range of ways. Now, I'm going through the whole canvas today, so that's why I spend so much time on that part of it. It is so critical to understand who your customers are, what your value proposition, and building that relationship and getting it out to the customers. So the channel, how does the company get its product to the customers? And what really we're talking about here is how are we informing customers? Are we sending out mail shots? Are we advertising on TV? Are we using radio? Are we using social media, all the whole range of social medias? Are we using celebrity endorsement? Are we using popular influencer to sell our products? All these different ways of getting people to know about your product. And then how do we get our product to the customer? So there's a kind of two parts to it. How do we inform them, and how do we actually get our product to them? Or how can they buy our product? Can they buy it online? Can they get it in the local shop? Do they have to go to a distributor, and so on, so on? How do they buy your product and service? They're the two critical areas. And I don't know if you're movie people or not, but then again, I'm so old, I've seen so many movies. But remember Kevin Costner's movie Field of Dreams? No? Well, the famous saying from Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. Okay, and he goes up and he builds a baseball field in the middle of a cornfield, and the ghosts appear and start playing baseball. And he says, if you build it, they will come. But basically, there's a qualifier for that. If you build it, they will come. But only if you tell them about it. You have to tell them that your company exists, and you have to tell them that the products exist. And if you do so, they'll come and buy it. It's as simple as that. So if you build it, they will come if you tell them about it. Then the relationships, which is just kind of flipped around here. How to keep and grow your customers. Now, getting the customers, identifying who they are, and holding on to them, giving them the level of service, and growing your customers. Getting more and more customers on board. So that's why, generally speaking, for a new startup company, you're looking at potentially the first 3 years are critical to be able to, as I said yesterday, anyone can start up a company. The real challenge is growing the company. And that's what we talk about in terms of the growth side of things. So finding your customers, keeping them and listening to them, keeping them interested in your product, in your service, or whatever it is. And similarly for in your projects, if you're introducing a new process or a new technology, a new piece of software or policy inside an organization, and it could be quality, it could be technology, whatever you're introducing, you have to bring the customers, bring your team members, bring the users of the technology. You have to bring them along and you build that relationship and say, this is what we want and this is what we'd like to introduce. How are you feeling about this? Can you tell us more what you expect, and so on? So you have to be listening and giving them and giving them and giving them. Of course, then the more you do so, more people will say, oh yeah, I like that process that was introduced. Can we use it over in this part of the organization? Yeah, sure. We need to make some modification, maybe that you tell us, but the general process works, or the general problem can be solved using this solution, and you begin to roll out the project in multiple locations and so on. That's how we did it, for example, in large organizations when we were introducing what was known as CMM, or if we were introducing a SAP system. We went to manufacturing first, got the basics right in there, and then when we started to use finance, and then HR, and then when we got all of these things working nicely together, we got the sales and marketing to come in and add a customer relationship database onto our SAP systems, and so on, so on, so on. They're already built into this now. So now it's an enterprise-wide type system. Every function in the organization uses the technology. They just have different interfaces. So growing your customers is critical, and they use this funnel here, just like in channels, and these are different from web and mobile versus physical. So, do you go into a shop to look at your products, or do you look at them virtually online? And you will notice that some companies have gone in that direction, where you go in and you can look and browse, and in the shop itself you can't buy anything. Go away and you buy online. Why? Because real estate has become so expensive in cities and so on that they can't afford to have their large warehouses and so on and so forth. So in you go. So it's like I won't say click and collect, which is another possibility. But you go in and you see, and probably if you're like you'd be younger than my children, but I know my daughter, and sometimes myself, she would, and even some of my younger colleagues in AIT, they'll go into shops, look at what's around there, see the prices, and say, I'm not spending that money for it. That's a ridiculous price. I'm not paying for somebody's rent and all this, and they'll go out and they'll go online.
and they'll find something similar. They might even take a photograph and say, find this, and you have technology, their recognition, image recognition, and say, find me this product online, and it'll come up, and you'll probably find it cheaper online. Okay, and you'll go and buy it because you might not be in such a hurry for it that you can wait for the delivery time and so on. You take that into account, but you've saved money. And people are doing that and have been doing it for quite a number of years. So this is the whole point, how do you physically get the product and grow your customers themselves? So how does a company keep and grow customers? And that might be the simple solution rather than having to invest in warehouses and stock rooms and all this sort of stuff. Just give us our orders, and if we can manufacture them pretty quickly, we'll send them directly from the manufacturing plant directly to the customer based on what they had ordered. Okay? Cutting out the middle bit. Then, of course, we have, which is quite important, the revenue stream. How are you going to get money in? What ways are you going to charge for your product? How are you going to price it? Is there a once-off payment? Is it a subscription fee? Is it pay some of it now and pay in 6 months' time for the rest of it? Like all your channels, if you're using Netflix or Sky Media or whatever, Disney Channel or whatever, you might get a fixed monthly fee for their content. Or if you're like me, I'm using Strava for exercise and all that. It's a fixed monthly fee. Some companies, if you buy your Skybox, get it now for 20, 30 euros a month, and for the first 6 months or 12 months, and after that it goes up to 90 euros and all that stuff. These are your different revenue models. Okay, as opposed to business model, it's a revenue model. What way do you want to charge? And it'll be different for different customers. Some people might pay everything up front and say, that's it, I'll pay the whole amount right now. Other people say, we'll spread it out, so on, and you make it. And then how do you want to do it? Do you want to do it through your Revolut card? Do you want to do it through your bank account, direct debits? Do you want to use a financing company and so on? So you have all these different. So how do you make it easy for people to buy your product in terms of the way they want to pay for it and so on? And then, as I said, the revenue model. How does the company make money from each segment? And depending on who the people are, different segments, their levels of income, their affordability and so on, then you have to set your pricing accordingly. And that can be quite a challenge. Companies actually hire pricing specialists, so they understand the market, they know who can pay what and when, and that's why they develop these. So revenue models, direct sales is one strategy, as I say, sell it directly in the shops, or you might lease it out over a period of time and so on. It depends on the product and service itself. If you're hiring an architect, for example, you might pay a retainer fee at the start, and then you might pay him at each stage of his plans when they're ready, and then you build up a contract. It's a project, you pay him at different stages. If you're buying a USB stick, you pay there and then. It's that simple, so you have different models depending on whether it's a product or a service that you're offering. Key resources. What are your most important assets? Your intellect is one of your important assets. What you already know and what you bring people together. And from that, you can develop these patents. You can have a customer list. You might hire somebody in from another company who knows a lot of customers that are in the same area that you might be interested in. And that's intellectual property. So, or the list of customers that you have identified to build your product, that's intellectual property. And it's a criminal offense. We actually fired a person for copying our customer database, and they actually passed it on to a rival. It went to court. It got quite serious because they stole our customer list, and they were going to a competitor essentially. So patents, and people themselves have intellectual, the way you do things, the way we understand how we run processes, how we the way I do my lectures, that's intellectual property. God help us if it is. I know it is, because I do things differently, and I have little twists and turns, and I have my own stories and my own experiences and so on that nobody else has, and that's my kind of intellectual property, for example. And I know how different businesses run. I've worked in different business. That's my intellectual property. And of course, then you'll have your qualifications, your pieces of paper, that a badge that a university tells you, yes, you've learned this stuff and so on. You've been taught this stuff. You've learned it when you've actually done it. Okay, that's learning by doing. So these are the, and of course, do you have money? Do you have access to money, finance to set up your business? And do you have physical presence? Do you own a building? Do you rent a building? The equipment you're using and all this. These are all part of your key resources. Do you lease or buy or build, rent equipment and so on? These are key resources that you need to identify. And of course, you'll be doing things as cost effectively as possible. And here they show, for example, on the human side, software engineers or scientists and so on. So, as I mentioned earlier on, you might need a software specialist to develop something for you because you're not a software engineer yourself. Okay, so you might have to hire in a professional design company to design the packaging of your product, even design the product itself to make it a little bit more pleasing to the eye, aesthetics, and then to make it a little bit more functional, easier to use. Product design engineers, and there's specific companies that are companies that specialize in those areas. You might have to hire them in, so they would be a key resource as such, or possibly a key partner, depends which we now talk about. So who are the partners in here? Is suppliers and the consultants that you might use. You might go in with a joint venture with another company and say, look, here's my idea, but you have a complementing product. We could use my idea in your product, and let's go into a new market here or release a new version of the product. As I said, suppliers would, generally speaking, be your initial key partners, setting up your agreements with your suppliers to make sure that you get the components and raw materials that you need to develop and build your product. Also, your customers or your retailers, wholesalers, they can be key partners as well, so they can guarantee that they get your product to the market. Your distribution company, you won't have your own distribution network. You'll hire companies in. Supply chain management, you'll hire a company to deliver your products, if they're physical products, to the customers. They become critical to the success of your product because you need to be able to deliver on time with the right quality, the right specification, and the right product for the right customer. There's 7 of these R's, as they call them. Right product, right place, right time, right customer, right quality. I think I have most of them there anyway. But having they become integral into delivering a product that meets customers' needs, and one of the needs might be they need it urgently or they need it within a reasonable period of time. Okay, so that they would be typical key partners, suppliers, and indeed your retailers. The key activities that we look at here, most important activities do you make the business to make the business work itself? Again, there's a kind of a little bit overlap. So activities, you might have to hire these consultants in, and you have to work with them over a period of time. They could be engineers, and likewise, I mentioned there a minute ago, key partners might be your distribution network, but they could also be part of your key activity because they might be advertising for you. They might charge you a small fee and say, right, we'll put your product brand up on the side of our lorries, for example, and that could be a key activity. But the important thing is the activity of getting your product. So they're committed to delivering your product to all your customers in a timely fashion, to keep them satisfied as such, and doing that. The actual doing of that's an activity, and that becomes important in terms of activity. How you actually produce your products and solve problems in the production. How quickly you listen to your customers. Do you have a process in place to listen to what your customers are saying, such that you can build in their requirements into your product and build out a better product in the next version of your product, and so on. And you see here, supply chain management. That's another one of my subjects I teach, but that's a key activity. Getting components in, building your stuff, and getting it out to the customers. Supply chain management. How effective is that? Is it efficient? Is it cost effective? It's an activity that you must undertake to get your products to your customers. And then the last one of all of these, and I'll keep going until I finish this, and I know we might run over a fraction. I'll keep talking. If you've got to go to another lecture, go ahead. I'll be recording this and so on. But anyway, the cost structure. How much does it cost me? How many people do I need to develop this business? And this is one of the other powerful parts of it. forces you to think about all your costs. Am I going to buy or rent equipment? Am I going to hire people, or will I contract people in so I don't have any long-term obligation to them? How much are is my distribution network going to cost me? How much are my individual raw materials? Can I get different components? Can I find more cost effective? Do I go abroad? Do I manufacture the components myself? These all form part of your cost base. How much is it going to cost me to rent a building, to lease equipment to build my product, to lease IT, to pay licenses on IT software that I'm going to use for running my finances, running my operations, and so on. And you build all that up gradually, and most importantly, you build it up. When you're investing and buying or leasing stuff, you think, well, this, I'm expecting to grow my company, so I need to be able to take higher volumes in 6 months time, and even higher volumes again in 12 months, 18 months, 3 years, 5 years. So I need to be able to think about the future at the same time. And that's how we put all of these activities, and we put a cost onto all of those activities, and that fundamentally becomes our cost structure. And the simple cost structure, take that from your revenue, total revenue, is your profit. And as I say, in business, if you cover all your costs and you have enough money at the end of the month to buy a beer, then you're on a winner. Same with your house. Cover all your costs, enough money, buy a beer at the end of the month, you're on a winner. Of course, that's oversimplifying it, because you need to build up more profits and expand and so on and so forth. But that's the general concept of it. So what are the important costs that you need to look after and prioritize? And you have to pay tax, you'll have to pay VAT, you'll have to pay the revenue commissioners. And so you have to factor in all of these. You have to pay your staff's PRSI, you have to pay income tax and all. So these are all costs that need to be taken care of in building up your cost structure. So this is just a little bit more. So that brings you into what I've done so far is giving you a very detailed explanation of each of the components of the business model canvas. And as I said, that's just another way of representing the same thing. And here's the important point now. I need to finish out on these parts. Every one of these things are guesses. You guess what you think. You have a good idea. Your guess, well, it might be these products. Do you remember what I said? Are they teenagers or are they old people that are buying these e-bikes and so on? You guess, well, I guess it might be the old people. Now you go out and test it. You go out and ask, are all the older people or are you younger people buying these bikes? Or you find out, and that you turn that guess into information. It's known as an hypothesis. You think this might be the case. You go out and you test your hypothesis. You ask questions, and you'll get answers, and that will confirm your guess or not. And that's the important things about learning organizations and learning. And that's a key point in relation to assignment work and so on. How do we learn? We go out and we find out what's going on. We ask, so we guess, we think we know something. Now we go out and we prove it, or prove it right, or prove it wrong. In any case, don't think of it as negative because it's wrong. Negative is extremely as valuable as positive. It gives you valuable information. And that's how we build these canvas. And these are just the building blocks based on the guesswork. So the more questions we ask, the more information data we get. The more data we get, the more information we have, and the more confident we become about our products and the way we're building it and so on. And all these. So turning hypotheses into facts, that's all I've just already said. You go out and you ask, how do we change guesses into facts? We go out and we ask questions. That's all it is. Find out, ask, and so on. So 4 steps to the startup path: customer development. We search, we look for who the customers are, and we then execute. We go out and deliver to these customers. So customer discovery, customer validation. If the validation might be, they say, no, we'd like to have this version of the product, or we'd like to have this feature in it. That's a pivot. We come back in the customer discovery. So that's the interworking and the segmentation side. And then when we have customer creation and we build a company, so when we identify what the customers want and more precisely what they want, then we know who these customers, this is customer creation, and then we go and build our company, or we start to build our company, because we know more about the customers we're giving them. So we search, find out who they are, and then we execute, we give them what they want. And customer development, test the problem, then the solution. So test your guesses, look for insights, understanding data, information, and then you start, and this is the process around the customer development canvas itself, or the business model. You find out who the customers are, and you keep going around and around. And as you can see, groups of people looking at the different canvases up there, because they're going through iterations, as we call it. So every time we do an iteration, we step the revision of the business model canvas itself, and we say we add new data. And sometimes it's just a simple change of color pen. So we started off in green, then we changed to a blue pen, then a red pen, then a black pen, and so on. So each color can be a different iteration, because we're getting more information. We're adding to what we already know. And sometimes we go back with the black pen and say what we thought there in using the green pen is no longer valid, so we ignore that and we keep building. So you're building a storyboard for all intents and purposes. It starts to populate out and out and out, and when you get to a level, say, right, we think we have all the 9 boxes, we've gone through a number of iterations, we're reasonably happy, everything works, then you have your first business model, and that's something that you go on, and it will change. That's what's important about all of this. So a hypothesis, your guesswork, what you think it is, design experiment. You go out and you say, well, what am I going to ask? How am I going to find out? And you design your experiment. It might be a questionnaire. It might be an interview. It might be some kind of a discussion forum or whatever. Design the experiment, and then you push it out. You test it. Send up the survey onto Facebook or Instagram, and people come back and they'll give you answers. That's insight, that's knowledge, or data coming back to you. Now you work on that data. So that simple little loop, come up, what's your guess, go off, do it, and then come back in and learn from it. And we mentioned the pivot. So if a pivot is quite simply customer validation, it comes back, they give you different information or they give you more information, and you say, well, now I'm going to have to change maybe one of the features in my product, because the customers, or these newer customers, are telling me something different or something new, and I need to build that into and that's a pivot. And you remember the example I'll give you of the lawnmower, the robotic lawnmower, and the other thingy, the using it for carrots and so on. That was a big pivot, because the customers came back and told me, we're not spending $20,000 on the lawnmower, but the farmer said, yeah, we'd buy that for $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, because it means I don't have to have manual labor. These robots can go up and do this thing, and it's extremely accurate. So why do you mean, what do you do when your hypothesis does not match reality? Then you're finding out, you're getting reality. You might think this is the situation, you might think this is the solution, but when you go out and you ask, the reality might be completely different. But that's the important thing. You find out, you get to understand what the reality is of your customers. And this is just another reiteration there of the one of the previous slides. Go out, search for your customers, check out who they are, where they exist, who they are, and then once you've identified that group of customers, then you start to create the business, and you, through execution, you start serving those customers with their needs and so on. And it's another way of representing the same thing. Verify the pivot, state the hypothesis, draw a business model canvas, and put up here. We'll test this part of the canvas, and we go right through the phase. What's the problem? Test and get answers back, and then we move on to the next step. So it's an iterative process. The whole business model canvas, each of the blocks within the business model canvas themselves, they're iterative processes. They're not, once you've done them, they're not finished. You go back again. You keep learning and learning and learning more about customers, revenue models, structures, new markets and new opportunities, new partners, different partners, changing activities. It's constantly evolving. That's why I particularly like it. It helps us to keep things going in a fluid motion. It's a process, not like your standard traditional business plan, which is say, put all this work in, this is what we're going to do, these are our customers, and off you go. The whole thing changes the following day. This thing responds to changes within a week, within a month, within a year. Your business plan, you don't go through the same whole exercise over and over again and come up with another version of it. It's too long, it's too cumbersome. I'm not going to bother explain this, but it's the same thing, how you're going to state your hypothesis. It's like a flow chart. and how you put together your test and your models and so on, and get information back. Physical challenge or web mobile challenges. And so customer validation, the same thing. Phase one, get ready to sell, get out of the building. That's one of the biggest, I would say, battle cries of the whole business model. You can't do this from your office. You can't do this from your desk inside. You might do a little bit. You might come up with the idea, the hypothesis. Now you need to test it and verify it. The only way you do that is you get out of the building. You physically get out of the building and go and talk to your customers. Don't be ringing them. Go out and physically meet them if you can at all. Certainly in the early days, and because you'll see more, you'll get more information. If we could have had this lecture by me with no video, just me talking over PowerPoints. I would promise you, it would not have had the same impact as you're seeing my face and my gestures and the way I'm speaking and what I'm emphasizing and so on. There's a lot more information going to you. You will probably pick up that he's very passionate about certain things and so on. So you pick up more data and you become more informed as opposed to somebody just that's why I never use audible books, because I don't like to listen to people talking as such. I like to be able to see and gather. My brain is hungry for more data. So that's how it actually works. And that was the good news on that, folks. That was the last slide. So covered. So that was that presentation in particular. That's a key presentation in terms of the business model Kanza, and it forms the basis of everything that we'll be doing from a lot of stuff from here on out. Okay, folks. I just need to close that out and then do this and hooray to stop. So, do we have any questions or comments now? For Tuesday, I will pre-record our presentation for Tuesday. As I said, I'm still waiting word from hospital to let me know whether I'll be not available on Tuesday. It's only a minor procedure, but in any case, I will pre-record a lecture or some material, and I'll put that onto Moodle. So keep an eye out on that. So this obviously will be known as lecture number 2. So lecture number 3 for Tuesday in this instance will be up in Moodle. Okay, folks, I will let you go and have a good weekend. Okay, and we'll see you next week. Okay.
Cheers, thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Nice week. Take care.